Back in May, I received this email from UAD. I decided to get stuck straight in and try Luna, not actually expecting much. I had been a UAD Spark subscriber from the first minute, as their plugins had always interested me, but I didn't own any of their hardware and I don't like being tied down in my studio. I was aware of Luna, but expected it to be very bare bones without UAD hardware. Hold up a minute. What's Luna? Well, it's Universal Audio's very own DAW, and it's free to Mac users. Kind of. We'll get to that. It's been on the market for a few years for users of their hardware, but it went native for everyone last November, and has been available to select Spark subscribers, including me, since May. Now with that out of the way, here comes the real question. Is it worth switching over to? That's a lot harder to explain. Here's my best attempt. Let's start with the basics. In terms of looks, it looks very modern and has some really nice general features, though you may have to get used to it. Opening Luna, this screen will greet you. I really like the way the create screen works. Just put the name of the project and time signature in and off you go. It's just that tiny bit smoother than other DAWs that open another window to do some of the details. Same with the recent projects. Pretty much everything currently on my laptop is in the list in a very orderly fashion. Multiple versions do not appear. Most of this has to do with the way the program manages saving files. This is something that, whether you like it or not, you will have to get used to. Luna saves all your sessions automatically, with no way to change that behavior. While I like this, you may not. So what do you do when you want to save a version of a mix? Usually you do save as, but in this case you can create versions and bookmarks. This is great as it manages everything neatly within one project instead of searching for the latest mix in your files. It's also the reason recent projects isn't clogged with multiple versions of the same mix. The only slight problem with this behavior is, should you forget to create a version, going back is a bit of a pain. Other things you can do on the home screen are managing your plugins and settings and a discover page that I basically never use. Once you get stuck into a project, first thing you'll notice is the way the project, particularly the mixer, looks. It's one of those things I just love about Luna. The insert management is great. You will immediately notice the extensions, and I'll get to those in a minute. The biggest thing for me is that the basic setup actually avoids numbers where possible. What I mean by that is you get a fader and a meter, and that meter does not include numeric values. It lets you know when you're peaking, and that's it. Combined with some of the other features, this really makes you listen instead of watching, and peak values are pretty inconsequential anyway. By default, the meter is pre-fader. I like it set up that way, but you can change it in the settings. Going back to the track view, you'll notice your mouse showing different behaviors depending on where on the track you hold it. This takes some getting used to, but it's really nice once you do. Everything else looks somewhat familiar and behaves that way as well, though things like the coloring of tracks is quick and easy, more so than in Logic, for example. Overall, it just looks modern when compared to many of its competitors. Let's look at recording and editing. I don't work much with MIDI, so I'm not going to delve into that topic a great deal. I'll just say that of my colleagues that do, many think the workflow is not up to snuff yet, and from the little hands-on time I've had with it, I tend to agree. Recording audio is actually the first major weak spot I found with Luna. The basic procedure is quite simple and pretty standard. You can create a new track and select the desired input. You can clearly see that it was designed with UAD hardware in mind, but that's only fair, and even with other interface brands, it's a fairly straightforward process. You can also open the recording workflow with this little button, which gives you access to pre and post roll. I honestly don't use these workflow windows too much, but it doesn't hurt to have it. Recording is the same as in most other DAWs. You arm the track, activate the monitoring, and off you go. Except, oops, that wasn't it. Here comes the first complaint of mine. R is not the shortcut for recording. In and of itself, this isn't a big deal. As far as I can tell, they've pretty much copied the shortcuts from Pro Tools, which is not what I'm used to. The problem is, you cannot change this behavior. There is no way to create custom shortcuts within the program. There is a way to do it within Mac, but to be honest, that's kind of a clunky solution. After that little debacle, you start recording. Basic audio tracking works like every other program, nothing special there. Except that if you own UAD hardware, you can commit the DSP plugins straight to the track without having to open console. It's a nice workflow improvement, but no game changer in my opinion. Then again, I'm not using the hardware, so let me know if your experience differs. However, if you want to record the same part multiple times, here's the next major hurdle. You can track multiple takes, but you have to interact with it manually to do so. There is an automatic feature, but it will replace the track on the previous version by default, so be very careful not to lose a take in the process. So unless you're only tracking live sessions with no overdubs, the recording workflow is at least currently subpar. Maybe Luna can redeem itself when it comes to audio editing. And I'm happy to report it can. Like I said earlier, the automatic tool switch in the mouse does when you hover over an audio track takes some getting used to, but once you do, it's great. You can mark a section and just delete it. It also features clip gain, which is something I otherwise only know in Pro Tools, and it even features a pitch control for each track that can do up to 24 semitones, so 2 full octaves up and down. Things like nudging are also pretty straightforward, and editing multiple audio tracks at once is done with a consistency I'm missing some of the programs. From here, it only gets better. The mixing workflow is where Luna really shines. The mixer is designed to look like a console, and while this may sound somewhat cliche, I really like that design. That in and of itself does not make the mixing workflow so intuitive though. What really sets this program apart is the extensions. Other DAWs have included similar workflow improvements, most notably Harrison Mixbus, but what sets Luna apart is the top-notch quality of their emulation. UAD has long been lauded for their faithful recreations of iconic hardware like the Neve 1073 and their own 1176. Scrolling through the mixer, you can see a few different extensions. As talked about before, they have a tracking stage, which you can take advantage of if you own UAD hardware. Just below, you'll find the tape emulation. There are 2 flavors of tape, Oxide and the Studer A800. These offer the same functionality as the plugins by the same name, but within Luna, settings on the extensions are global by default, meaning any changes you make to the tape machine will affect any channel it's put on. For bus channels, there's a different flavor, the ATR 102. Beyond the tape extensions, there's the Vision console. The channels mirror the Vision channel strip available from UAD, but once again they come preloaded on every channel except buses. By default, buses come preloaded with the legendary API 2500, but they can also be switched to the Vision strip. My habit for managing these is using the top layer buses like drums with the 2500, while having lower level buses like overheads equipped with a Vision channel to have the various controls it offers right on the channel strip. On the buses, you'll find the final type of extension, summing. This is unique to Luna, so there's no standalone plugin and it comes in 2 different flavors, API and Neve. These are recreations of the summing buses found on API and Neve consoles and is thereby supposed to impart the much overused term of analog warmth. That's not to rag on the extensions though. They do make an audible difference and I love using the Neve extension in particular. How much of a difference these make, we will explore towards the end of the video. While most of the extensions are available as standalone plugins, their seamless integration into the software are a huge workflow improvement in my opinion. I often end up with just a few compressors and maybe 2 or 3 delays and reverbs. Being able to just grab the EQ knob without having to click in and out of plugins is a game changer. You can also make changes to multiple EQs at once, which can come in handy when EQing stereo microphones without having a specific bus. The analog look and build can also make for some truly analog moments, like cranking a knob wondering why nothing's happening until you realize you haven't turned it on. The Sends have some interesting functionality like multing, but I've never actually used it, mostly because I didn't have to, with up to 8 cents per channel. The bypass options included on the master are also an addition worthy of mention, as you can bypass everything at the click of a button for a quick sanity check. Smaller things, like changing the faders depending on extension added on the channel, attest to a nice attention to detail. Sounds great. What's the hitch? Well, remember how I told you Luna is kinda free? Yeah. The features I've been raving about for the last few minutes aren't. Most are included in the Luna Pro bundle for $200, but the Neve extension is another $300 and is only available to owners of UAD hardware. The first part is absolutely fine in my book. The extensions are top-notch plugins and giving those away for free should by no means be an expectation. The second part I take issue with though. The Neve is included in the 30-day trial you get when first downloading Luna, but is unavailable thereafter unless you own some kind of UAD hardware. If the hardware was needed to run the extension, I would kinda get it, but it isn't. And why it's not available as a standalone purchase is beyond me. That the same applies to the Neve 1073 is suggests this is not on UAD alone, but I still don't get it. The other major oversight in my book is not including the extensions in Spark. I commend UAD for offering their plugins both for purchase and as a subscription. Consumer choice is always great, but it's not like Spark is amazingly cheap, and not including the extensions when many of the plugins they're related to are is frustrating. This affects me personally as well, as I'm currently on a year-long offer UAD made to some Spark subscribers. As of now, my access runs out in May, at which point I will have to not only purchase the extensions to avoid a major workflow disruption, but will lose access to the niche summing extension for good. Unless I buy UAD hardware, obviously. There are some smaller nitpicks. Sometimes Luna jumps through the plugins list when loading a new instance of a plugin, and you end up having to reload it. But overall, Luna has improved my mixing workflow massively. Before I move on to the last major topic, a little shout out goes to the file management. Project files are neatly organized and include an export folder by default. Exporting doesn't open a separate window, but is done from within Luna, and it ends up in the folder within the project folder. This will sound somewhat nerdy, but at the volume of projects I often find myself managing, it's a true time saver to have everything pre-organized, instead of finding you have exported 20 separate tracks into your main Logic folder, and they've ended up between all the projects. Now for the big one. Does Luna have a sound? There's a never-ending argument that DAWs have a certain sound, and I will not walk into that quagmire. However, UAD makes a huge marketing point of Luna being analog in the box, and I just had to put that to the test. I devised the decidedly unscientific method of using a mix I had done within Luna and went about recreating it in Logic with the same plugins and settings. Here are the results. You can hear for yourself which one you prefer.
Dark December nights, noses cold and red, searching the stalls for mulled wine and gingerbread, shimmering lights, making my heart feel a glow. We used to celebrate together, the whole family. My brothers and I fit right under the tree. When I think of it now, it doesn't seem so long ago. No, can we go back in time? 'Cause what I need is another year of Christmas carols. I'm still wishing for snow. I don't mind wasting my time, 'cause I've got nowhere to go. The kid and me. So hang up the lights, and maybe tonight we can make another Christmas memory.
If you ask me whether Luna is worth it, I will always say it depends. If you're working with MIDI, arranging, or doing EDM, it's probably not for you. If, like me, you deal mostly with audio tracks, then I'd say yes, with a caveat. I have not been able to switch to Luna full-time in my studio, as tracking is a massive hassle compared to other programs. I currently track in Logic, export the tracks, and import them into Luna for mixing. If you mostly mix external tracks, or you don't mind this method of working, I highly recommend checking it out. What do you think about Luna? Have you tried it yet? Let me know in the comments.